Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Adobe XD Masterclass. My name is Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe, and I hope you're all doing well on this Friday afternoon. And as Jack says, happy Friday. If you are tuning in live here on Behance, let me know who you are and where you're tuning in from. If you're on YouTube, head on over to behance.net/Adobe Live so I can see all of your smiling faces. We've got Steve and Anahit and Harshal and Jack and Philip and Juhi and Cody and Diego and Megan and Sarah and all awesome people in the chat. New faces, old faces, not old as in old, but ones I haven't seen before. Hope you're all well today. All right, so we have a fun show packed for today. I was actually just about to switch over to the Daily Creative Challenge landing page, but that's a little bit for later. So we're going to save that for a little bit. But what we're going to do, I'm going to hop over to Dribbble just for a second. I'm not signed in, so I'm very prepared today, as you can tell. I haven't had coffee in 48 hours, so it's been a ride, right? So last week during the masterclass, I can see your smiling faces, Jack. I certainly can. So last week during the masterclass, we put together this podcast application exploration. I wasn't sure where I was going to go with it, but this is kind of where we landed at. And of course, there we go. Okay, I was going to say just my luck. Nothing's working today. But this is kind of what we put together. Henry is watching from the UK and someone's watching from Sri Lanka. Awesome. Great to see everyone. Ashraful is new. Great to see you. Tia is from Los Angeles. Harshal from India. Isn't it like midnight in India right now? Thank you for staying up so late. This is the 25th masterclass. Can you believe it? This is crazy. So yeah, last week we put together this and I had a lot of fun doing it. Came out great. The reception of it has been fantastic. Today, what I want to do is expand upon it a little bit, but more importantly, start to put together a case study that we can post on Behance, which I'm hopefully going to be posting a little bit later today. So let's go ahead and hop over to Adobe XD. And by the way, I'm going to be drinking a lot of water today. Been feeling very weak with this coffee strike that I'm on for these medical tests, and it's just kicking my butt. All right. So here's where we landed last time. We explored our design system. We didn't really get to use the pinkish, purple, reddish color, whatever this is. We didn't get to use that, so maybe we'll find a way to incorporate that today. We settled on our logo, which is the boop typeface, or the boop mark, and then we can use basically just the B as a primary mark, and then maybe the entire thing as the secondary. Harshal says, I watched all 24 classes offline. Thank you, Harshal. I really do appreciate that. It's 12:30 a.m. Oh boy, you're braver than I am. So here's how the logo looks inside of with that yellow background. And if we go ahead and play this, we did wire it up last week, and we've got that whole animation thing. We're probably not going to go with it. It just doesn't work. It's a little bit complicating, so we're going to keep it nice and simple, right? And then we put together this mobile application. If I play it, there's a little bit of a delay, and those cards kind of fly in from the left and the right, and it leaves us with the home screen, right? Let me do that one more time, and vroom, right? Kind of fancy. Now, I did spend a little bit of extra time, and I did polish it up a little bit, so I have something that looks like this. I basically just added a few extra images in the background. I did expand to show the whole secondary mark here at the top. But like I mentioned, I want to now expand on it a little bit more and also create some sort of a case study that we can post on Behance. So one of the main things that I want to expand on today is maybe what it looks like when you click into or tap into one of these particular cards and you can see the podcast, right? So here's what we're going to do. I am going to duplicate this over to the right, just so I have some of these elements over there, and I'm not going to use all of them, just a few. And what I did was I just selected the entire artboard, Command and Control D, and it duplicated it right over. Now I probably don't want most of this stuff, right? Honestly, if I'm being honest, I'm going to ungroup all of this, and I probably don't need the logo. I don't need the cards. I do want the navigation, so I'll keep that down there. I don't want the search at the moment. Maybe I'll put a search icon, and then the background, we'll probably keep it, but it's probably not going to be seen. Actually, you know what? No. I'm going to just get rid of the background and change the color to match the navigation bar at the bottom. So we have a nice minimalistic feel. Now, I do want to remind people that this is one of our XD Masterclasses. We do go a little bit deeper than our daily challenges. So if anyone has questions on Behance, definitely throw them in there. We'll be taking a look. I won't be able to talk about anything that's upcoming except multiple flows, which is coming in August. But other than that, can't say anything, but you got to wait until Adobe Max. We have some pretty big stuff coming up. So this will be, let's say, podcast. There we go. All right. So on here, we want a few elements. We might want at the top some sort of an area to show off who we're interviewing, for example, and we can also put the person's name up there. We can also put maybe a little bit of a description down below of what the podcast is going to be, maybe some icons so you can actually interact with this particular podcast, maybe a play button, pause, devices, sound, that sort of thing. And then of course, a scrubber towards the bottom. So I'm going to grab my rectangle and draw one out right about here. And I may want this to be a little bit rounded. So we have, it's Yellow Friday again, indeed. But although this image that I'm going to put in here is sort of green, so we're going to kind of break away from the yellow. Now I may want to stylize this a little bit, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this rectangle to access the path. Now if I were to just pull this up, just this one down here, it's very sharp. Now you may want that possibly, but I want it a little bit curvy. So what I'm going to do, I can add a point here. I can double click to add a curve, right? And I can just kind of move these around just like that. And I've got this fun looking curve for this shape at the top, and I can adjust the curve a little bit more if I wanted to. And there we go. It looks okay. It's not perfect, but it looks okay. And of course, once we add an image in there, it'll kind of mask out some of those imperfections. Now, speaking of the image, if I hop over to Finder, I do have an image here that I want to use. I can just pop this directly into Adobe XD, pop it onto a shape, and it's going to automatically mask it. And I can double click and move it around. Now, one thing I might want to do, because I might want some text up in this area as well, and I don't want colors clashing, is I might want to just move this over to the side. It also gives it a nice artistic feel to it, but you're noticing that we have this white border around the side, and we probably don't want that, right? So I'm going to duplicate this shape, Command and Control D, and I'm just going to use my eyedropper, and I'm going to select or just click on one of these colors, right, with the eyedropper. And I'm going to make sure that this is behind. Now, you might be noticing, I'm going to just name this container, and this will just be image. You might be noticing when we zoom really far in, we've got a little bit of a difference in color. Like it looked fine in Finder, right? You can't really tell the difference, but when it's on a solid background, you can kind of see that up at the top, she almost does have that yellow hair, right? That's I didn't do that on purpose, but that's interesting. So there's a little bit of a darker color up here. The proper color is down here, and then it goes a little bit darker as well. So for that, what I'm able to do is I can right click and just edit in Photoshop. And Photoshop is going to launch in just a moment. There we go. And I can just very quickly create a new layer, for example, select one of these colors. And just to make my life a little bit easier, what I can do is I can just pull this out like this. Just a gradient, just so that we have consistent color at the top and at the bottom. And if I did overlap a little bit down here, I could just grab a layer mask. This, of course, is not a Photoshop class, but if you missed Terry White's class this morning, it was a great getting started class. So if you haven't used Photoshop, definitely go back and watch his masterclass from this morning. So I'm going to paint in with black, and there we go. Now I just have to hit save, hop back into XD, and there it goes. So it's not perfect, right? But what I can do now is select this container in the background and just sample that individual color there. That looks quite a bit better. Now it just blends in really nicely. All right, that's looking pretty good. Now, right about here, we may want, like I mentioned, some header text, maybe the person's name, for example. And we have been using, if I hop over here, the Behance New Pro typeface. And we're going to continue that. I can actually just copy these just to make my life easier and boop, paste them right about here. And maybe this person's name is Mary Ellis, for example, right? And I'm going to make this a little bit larger. And there we go. I can put it right about here. Now, we do have this area down here it's a little bit harsh. I think we're going to get back to that a little bit later on once we start defining what the actual case study looks like. But I do want to blend this area in a little bit. So we're going to talk a little about that later. But right about here, we might want a little bit of a description of what this podcast is. So with my text tool, instead of simply clicking, which will create an area, a point text, we want to click and drag to create an area text, just like that. Now I'm going to not touch the typeface right now. We will get back to that in a second, but let's go ahead and in this episode of the Boopcast, right? Howard sits down with there we go. Perfect. All right. That should do. Now, of course, there's a lot going on. Hashtag BoopFan team. I like that, Noor. So there's a lot going on with this typeface and this text layer, right? One, the typeface, we probably want to go back to Sophia Pro because this is not a header. It's more of a body copy. It's way too large, and probably the weight is also a little bit too big. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Sophia Pro, just like that. And let's definitely drop this down quite a bit. Let's try 16 pixels, see what that looks like. Let's change the weight to about medium. Might also want to center it and then drop the line height a little bit. And maybe just to really emphasize that this is the Boopcast, that's the podcast name, I'm going to just select that and set this to bold. All right, double click. There we go. That's looking pretty good. Perfect. So we've got a little bit of a description down there. I can probably even make this a little bit bigger, but we're going to see how that looks. And again, like I stress, always, preview, it does look a little bit small. So maybe I'll bump this up to about 18. Stretch this out just a little bit. There we go. All right. So nice font choice. Thank you. Big fan of Sophia Pro, and this one is the Behance New Pro typeface. All right, so down here, to actually control this podcast, we may want some icons, maybe a pause button, for example. So for that, I'm going to start with the pause button. I'm going to grab an ellipse and just draw one out like this, nice and large so it's easily accessible. There we go. And maybe for this one, we can try pulling in that yellow, right? So I can press the I key on my keyboard to get the eyedropper, click, and then we have our yellow. Now, yellow against white, it's a little bit hard to see sometimes. So what you might want to do is just add a tiny shadow right behind the button, right? I'm going to add a little bit of a shadow. Maybe I'll pull in a little bit of color, maybe a bit of orange. Make sure to blur it quite a bit and just really experiment with what this shadow is going to look like. Just something like that. Just very subtle, just to kind of pop it off the background just a touch, right? And we can definitely go back and experiment with this. I'm not loving it just yet, but we'll run with it for now, and we'll come back to this later if we have some time. Now, because this is a pause button, super simple to create that. You can either create it with a rectangle, or a line. So let's go ahead and just use a rectangle. Draw one down here. You don't want a border on that one, and we'll just have two of them like that and make sure they're both centered. That looks pretty good. It's a little bit large, actually. All right. I can sit here and just finesse this all day, but we're going to run with this for now. I can just select both of these. I'm going to group them, and this will just be called pause. All right, so now over to the left and the right, we may want, your lips are not synced. Oh, so Henry, go ahead and refresh the page. There's an issue, I don't know if it's on YouTube's side or Behance's side. I'm assuming it's YouTube's side, where sometimes if you go away from the page or you go to another application and you come back, refreshing will fix that. Don't know why that happens, but it does. All right, so we've got our pause button. Now we might want some controls to go to the next podcast or the previous podcast. So what you could do is go to the plugins panel and use the icons for design plugin. Let's see if we have any decent ones. We have next over here, which doesn't look too bad. We've got one from material. You can also open up a third-party application if you have one. I do have an icon manager called Nucleo. And let's try next. Let's see. Got some over there. All right. Now I did have one. Let me see on my other document what this one was. Oh, forward. Ah, forward. Helps if I spell correctly. Forward. There we go. Now we have a few extra ones. This one is nice because it has a little bit of a subtle rounded corner. And of course, you can very easily make your own using XD, using the polygon tool and a line. But I do want to get to the case study, shortly. So I want to just make sure I zip through this pretty quickly. And for this one, for the backwards one, we can just duplicate it and press the flip button. Boop. There we go. And I'm going to make sure to name this backward. Perfect. Now maybe over to the left, we might want maybe devices. Just so like if you're streaming this to a speaker or a television, you can click on one of those just like that. Makes it a little bit larger. That looks pretty good. And then we might want something to control the volume. Let's see. Let's see if there's one that's sort of in the same ballpark as... Is there one with slightly rounded corners? This one, sort of. I guess this could work, right? And make this a little bit larger. Perfect. Okay, let's see how things are looking. Can we drag and drop icons from Nucleo? You absolutely can. So that's what I've been doing for the last few icons. Just basically, you can either click and copy it, or you can just drag and drop. And that's looking pretty good. I think, overall they might look a little bit small, but you have to remember, right, that phones themselves, where's my phone? Here's my phone. Phones themselves are not very large. So you might want to have some big icons, right? So that you can very easily, all your users can very easily just tap on things. That's looking pretty good. Okay, I'm not loving the shadow in the background behind that particular icon, but we might change that a little bit later. All right, the last thing we might want to add to this particular screen is the timestamp, or how far you've played and how far is left, and then of course the scrubber itself. So I'm going to grab my text tool. Let's say we've listened to 10 minutes and 23 seconds of this. I'm going to make this quite a bit smaller. Let's try 12. And I might want to also drop the opacity a little bit. I'm going to make sure these line up really nicely. Let's try regular. And then on this side, this one will probably want to right justify. And this one, maybe there's 52 minutes and 20 seconds left. Perfect. Now this gives us a nice amount of room in the middle. MD is asking, can I store icons on Nucleo? Absolutely. So Nucleo is free to download. The actual icon manager is free. They do offer their own icons, which I haven't purchased yet. I believe they're $99 or something like that. So they're locked right now. They have a few free ones in here. But I did have my own icons that I purchased years ago and some not too long ago. Symbol icons and these stroked icons and feather icons, I think feathers are free. But these two are were purchased separately. So I just loaded them in and I can use Nucleo as an icon manager, which is great. All right, so we've got these two. Now what I can do is I can grab my line and drag it all the way across here to create the initial scrubber. I can also round out the caps a little bit. There we go. That looks pretty good. And pop it on up a little bit. Now this will be the inactive section of the line. So I'm going to just drop the opacity, or you can also drop the color as well. And now for the active section, what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this line, Command and Control D. And this one I might want to set to our lovely yellow. And I should mention, because some people didn't know this last time, is if you're working with an object and you want to fill in the border. So let me change this to another color. Inside of your assets panel, if you have those icons saved, not shaved, you can right click and you can go to apply as border. Victor's saying you're a bit too fast. I do apologize. I do talk quite a bit fast, but I want to make sure I get through everything. And these are definitely our master classes, so they go a little bit deeper than our usual sessions. So you can always go back on YouTube, rewatch things, slow it down as well. There we go. So we've got that there. This is maybe the 10 minutes. And then we obviously want the little scrubber. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my ellipse tool and draw one out just like this. Now maybe the inside will be our yellow color. And then we might want white on the outside and maybe a little bit of a shadow as well. So I'm going to actually select this icon up here. I'm going to copy it and I'm going to right click and then paste appearance. You can also use the shortcut key over to the right. Where did I buy my icons from? I don't remember exactly where I got them from, but the pack that I believe I purchased, the symbol icons, I think they're just, if you just search symbol icons, you should be able to find them. All right, add a border. Let me tweak the shadow just a little bit. Pull it in a touch. There we go. All right. So that's looking okay, right? And Sherry's asking, quick question, is there any way to have the layers and assets panel open at the same time? There unfortunately isn't. It's something that I've definitely spoken to the team about, and I know a lot of users are asking for that functionality. It's something that's on their radar. I'm not sure how they're going to tackle it or when they're going to tackle it, but something I would love to see in XD, just so we don't have to, swap between the two things all the time. All right, so maybe I also want to bump this up a little bit to medium. That's looking okay, I think, right? Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and group these, and this is gonna be called Scrubber. And these are gonna be called Group, Command and Control G, Controls. Make sure everything is lined up really nicely. The Scrubber does look a little bit thin though, so I'm gonna just dive in here and make this a little bit thicker. Bump this up just a touch. Because again, you want to make sure that all of your users are able to access some of these icons and they're not too small. All right, I think that'll do. Perfect. Okay, so we do have the image at the top. We have who we're interviewing. Maybe we'll just move this up just a little bit. We have a description. We have our controls. And we have our scrubber. Now, one thing we might want to do, because ideally you would click on one of these cards, it would take you directly to this screen. You might want a way to go back. So for that, all I have to do is just make a little bit of an arrow. Of course, I could use an icon, but I can just grab my pen tool. I did turn on the grid. So if you click on your artboard right down here to the right, you can turn on your square grid, or Command and Control apostrophe. We'll turn that on as well. I'll just make a little bit of an arrow, set that to white, increase the size, maybe round out the caps a touch, and I'll just make sure to position it over to the left. There we go. All right, looking okay. Not loving it completely, but I think it's gonna work for now. We can definitely make changes later. All right, so what we're gonna do is we are going to start creating the actual Behance case study. And there are many ways to do it. A lot of people, including myself, like to just design the entire thing on one very long artboard and either export that as one large image, or you can export it as several images. You can just kind of copy and paste the elements on different artboards. But I kind of like designing it all in one just so I can see how it flows throughout the entire thing. So I'm gonna grab my artboard tool and draw one out. I wanna make sure it's at least about 1400 pixels. I like designing a little bit larger. So I'm gonna go, let's make it even 2000 pixels wide. And we'll start with whatever this is, right? But we're definitely gonna need a lot more space than that. All right, here we go. So what I want to do is I want to get some sort of an image for the background, because one of the big things that will really attract people to continue scrolling or even click on your case study to begin with is a nice large header image that showcases maybe a little bit of what they're going to get into. Not everything, because you want them to scroll down a little bit, but definitely you want them to kind of want to scroll a little bit. Is there any guideline rule for the size of buttons and text inside the button? So if you're designing for a mobile application, typically it's like 45 pixels high. At least, these icons down here, you'll want the hotspot to be about 45 pixels so that they're easily accessible. But I would say, aim for that, and then whatever text comfortably fits in there. Laura says, how would you return to a podcast you've already swiped away on the first screen? That's a good question. I haven't figured that out yet, but that is a very good question. This is why user experience and user testing helps quite a bit. Case study. All right, so for this header up at the top, what I want to do is I do have over here this great looking background image that I grabbed from Adobe stock, and I'm actually going to go ahead and quit Photoshop just so my computer doesn't explode on me. I'm just going to drag this in here. Now this is a very large image. It's not super large, so I can definitely shrink that down just a little bit. But if it was extremely large, or I was working with a smaller artboard, I would probably want to, create a container using a rectangle and then drag that in. But I think this could work. There we go. All right. How can we save in image format within XD? So if you're talking about how do you save an image from XD, so I have an image here. Let's say I wanted to save this one. I can right click and I can go to export. Where am I? Export selected, or if you have multiple selected or marked for export, you can export as batch. Or if you want to save an entire artboard, what I can do is I can select both of these, right click, export selected, and I can pop them in a folder. I can choose PNG, SVG, PDF, whatever it might be, right? And I'm going to, I agree, Martin. And I'm going to choose, let's say PNG. And for this one, I might want to also export a larger size. So I'll make sure to select web, designed at 1x, and export. So now when I go over back to Finder into that folder, I've got all of my exported images, and there are the 2x versions. Perfect. All right, let me grab some water. Hope you're all drinking water as well. All right, so we've got our background image, and maybe at the top of this image and this case study, we may want to start by showcasing the logo of this particular podcast application, and then maybe just a sneak peek of the actual app itself. So I'm going to hop over here. I'm going to grab the B that we've been using, copy it, paste it, and I might want it a little bit larger. So I'm going to really enlarge that thing. Now, as I did this, because I'm using rounded corners, right, I can dive in here and just do something like that, just to make sure that they remain nice and round. I'll space those out just a touch. There we go. Oops. Perfect. All right, so I can position this right about in the center. Now, one thing I think could be interesting, right, is we are water. Yeah, that's true. We are mostly water, aren't we? Is maybe kind of having this particular, I don't even know what this is called. It's kind of, I guess it's a rounded rectangle, but this thing kind of go through the B and kind of intersect with it. I think that'd be interesting. So what we can do for that is I can grab my rectangle tool. I'll draw one out, round out the corners. I'm going to sample this yellow, and I'm going to rotate it about 45 degrees. I'm going to try to get fancy with this. And I do want to make sure that we have the border set to white. It's on the inside. And I'm just going to make it a little bit thicker, probably somewhere around 5. And I can decrease my opacity just to see if that lines up. It mostly lines up. I can move this in just a little bit. There we go. That looks pretty good. Perfect. Okay. So now, of course, this doesn't necessarily work because we've got a little bit of a border down here. So what we can do is we can actually use our masking, right? So I can grab this shape right over here. I can actually grab the entire body, right? Copy that, paste it, and use that as a mask. Look at that. So now, of course, we have a little bit of an issue right there, but for that, we just have to dive in here, make this a touch larger. Nope, other way around. We want to make that a touch smaller. That's what I meant to do. Touch smaller. Whoops. Nope. I moved it by mistake. That's what I did. And it also doesn't line up perfectly, so I'll have to make sure to expand that, but I do want to make sure that this is a touch smaller. And this one is going to be a touch smaller as well. Or was that one larger? It's been a day. There we go. Okay, so now I want to dive in here, select the rectangle, and just make sure that these lines line up nicely. Almost got it. You really want to, you know, finesse this thing into place. Let's see if I can tweak the, there. Ooh, did I get it? Almost got it. I mean, from a distance, you're probably not even going to notice that it's off just a little bit. I'm not going to sit here and just like twiddle this. I don't even know if that's a word, but it's looking pretty good, especially from a distance. If I play this, you probably don't even notice that little tiny little bit that's off. All right, so we've got the actual logo at the top looking pretty good. Now, like I mentioned, we might want to show what it kind of looks like towards the bottom, but of course not the entire thing, right? So I'm going to go over here. Now I did already export the image of this, right? The border of the new line can be bigger. Yeah, it probably could be. If I increase the border just a little bit. No, that goes the other way. I'll figure it out. I'll just make some small tweaks. But honestly, if you zoom out, you don't even notice it. So I'm going to hop back over to Finder just for a second, and I do have this home screen that was exported at 2 times the size. Pop it into XD. And I want just a little bit of this kind of peeking up at the top, because you can imagine that, you know, everything from here up is kind of above the fold, and this down here is what's going to be below. So you want to give a little bit of a sneak peek at what's going to be down there. So I'm going to position this right about here. I might also want to round the corners just a touch. So if I play this, I can also go ahead and set my scrolling, let's say to 1080, right? And there we go. So that's what it's going to kind of look like, right? Now we are going to deal with this area here, which is a very harsh line. We'll deal with that a little bit later. I do have something over to the side if I have to bring it in, but I definitely want to make sure that, and it would kind of be what I did over here, where I just have a separate shape and I just continue this down here so that it's kind of more of a seamless blend and not necessarily this harsh line. So we have this looking pretty good, and now we might want to kick off what this actually is, to tell people what this project is all about. So what I'm going to do for that, I'm going to type out, let's say, the project. I'm going to make this nice and large, and we can either go for our Behance new typeface, and maybe we want expanded bold, or even extra bold, possibly. We can set all caps. That looks okay. Or we can also do something like Sophia Pro or Sophia Pro Soft, for example. I don't know. What do you all think? Which one do you like for the headers of this particular case study? Do you like this one over here, which is the Behance New Pro Expanded Extra Bold, or Sophia Pro Soft? Let me know. And while you're doing that, I am going to write out a little bit of a description of what this particular project is. So this one I might want to convert into area text. Definitely want to make this quite a bit smaller. Probably not all caps. All right, and all right, let's see. So Behance, Sophia Pro Soft, Behance. Oh boy. Okay. It's very mixed. So we've got one for Behance. Let's see. Behance 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, Zabit is just trolling now. But I'll count that one. It's got about 6 for Behance. And then let's see. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, there's a few more for, okay, we're gonna go for Behance. I kind of like the soft look too, but let's go for Behance for this one. And this I'm gonna make a little bit more small, a little bit smaller. Let's go ahead and, oops, there we go. Maybe let's right align it. Now I don't want bold, let's try regular. Okay, it's looking okay. But maybe to add a little bit of styling to this, what I might want to do is kind of pull in some of that yellow throughout this project, right? So I'm going to grab my rectangle and just draw one out across here. bring in that yellow and make sure to move it behind this text. Now, here's where things get kind of fun and exciting, right? We can actually use this as a background for a padded group. So if I go ahead and select this line that we just created, or I guess I should say rectangle, and also the project, I'm gonna go ahead and group them. Let's go ahead and name this header. And now what I can do is I can turn on padding over here within my properties inspector so that, when the time comes that we're going to be adding in an additional header, I can duplicate this down and I can just type out, let's say, the logo. And you're noticing that line behind resizes beautifully as I'm doing that. But we'll get back to that shortly. And I can also, let's say, maybe bold Boopcast, change Behance to a nice blue, and maybe also add in a slight line behind Boopcast as well. Just because I love this yellow that we're working with. There we go. All right. Thanks for joining, Newer. Have a great weekend. All right, so let's take a look. Let's scroll down. We've got our project. Got a little bit of a description, a little bit offsetted, which is kind of nice. And when I do get to, actually, because we are running out of time a little bit, I'm gonna just go over to this project here, copy this background, and paste it in. And as you can kind of see what I was doing, I basically took some of those elements and I extended them downwards, right? And let me delete the background back here, move this down here. And there we go, right? That's kind of what I was getting at. All right. So that's looking pretty good. Position this somewhere right about here. Got that looking okay. Again, we want a little bit peeking up. So Nina's asking, what is the command to move it to back? It's Command Shift and then the left square bracket key will move it to back. Command Shift left square bracket key to move it to the back. Command Shift right square bracket key to move it up. All right. There we go. And I might want to, I also have over here just a little bit of a white line. I can position this right there. Just like that. Just to give a little bit of interestingness to our design, right? All right, that's looking pretty fancy. Now we do have a little bit of a problem down here, right? We have the white navigation bar against the white background. So in this case, that's where we can kind of pull in some shadows. So I'm gonna add a very subtle shadow here. I can also add in a little bit of color like I've been doing. Just a little bit, not a lot for this one. Just enough to separate that from the background. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So things are looking pretty good. We've got our header image at the top. We have the project. We have a little bit of a description and a preview of what the app looks like. And if I preview this, you can kind of see what people would see when they go to, now I did notice that the background is all messed up now, right? Yeah, someone just pointed out our logo is not aligned anymore. Oh no. I can just dive in here, move this over, and bam, good enough, right? That'll work. That'll do, pig. I can scroll down. We've got a little bit of a preview over here, project, and then we're going to get down here to the area where we talk about the logo. And this is going to be a fun one because I'm going to get a little bit creative with this one. So I'm going to drag out my artboard a little bit down. I'm going to copy this down here. I'm going to name this the logo. Perfect. Let me just tweak this just a touch. All right. So over here, we want to kind of explain what the logo means, what the different elements on the logo refer to, and identify the primary mark and the secondary mark. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the entire logo right up here. Now I don't need, let me just grab that, paste that in there. Now, of course, I don't need the anchors that we created. So I'm just going to delete and ungroup this. Delete that. There we go. Logo. I'm going to make this quite a bit larger, just like this. So it's really visible on this page. Now, because I did enlarge it, I want to make sure to dive in here and make sure that all of the rounded rectangles are nice and round and updated. Same thing over here. Perfect. Okay, so now we want to start the process of identifying all the different pieces. Martin is asking, is it possible to make tips of the letters white where you have the yellow rectangle? Where? I'm not sure. Oh, maybe, no. I'm not sure where you're talking about, but clarify that and I will take a look. All right, so we've got our Boop logo, and maybe, just to get a little bit creative, we might want a little bit of a different colored background. So maybe from about here down, we're gonna add a little bit of a gradient. Let's change this to linear gradient. We do wanna go from the white at the top to maybe just a very subtle gray, just like that. All right. All right, so now essentially we want to, call out certain things. So for example, this over here, there's a little bit of a microphone reference in there, and I want to make sure to call that out. So what I'm going to do here is let's go ahead and draw out a line. Where's my pen tool? There we go. From about here up and then over. And I'm purposely making sure that it's not perfectly straight, because I do want it, a little bit of a funness to it. Pressing escape to get out of there, and I'm going to make this nice and thick. Let's pop this on the border. There we go. And then we might want a rectangle. I'm going to rotate this a little bit. I can also double click to access the path so that I can make sure everything lines up nicely. And we might also want, some sort of a funky shape to it. There we go. All right. Fabrizio is asking, what do you think about animation in Behance presentation, like logo animation in GIF? I love it. I think it's always a good idea to have videos or animations, as long as they're not too large and bog down the page, but I think it's a great idea. So we've got this looking pretty good. Now, it does clash a little bit with the gray background, so I may tweak that just a touch. But for now, I'm just going to type out hint of a microphone. Make this a bit smaller. Maybe I'll even rotate it just a little bit. There we go. And maybe I'll medium or bold. That looks pretty good. So now I can go ahead and group these. I have something else selected, don't I? There we go. Group. And I'm going to call this callout. Now I can go ahead and use this on some of the various other elements. I can even convert that into a component if I wanted to, but let's go ahead and flip that. I'm going to make sure to flip this back, rotate it just a little bit. Let's go for B. Whoops. B, but flipped. And maybe I'll change this color to one of the other colors that we've been using. Let's apply that as a border. And I'm gonna pop this right about here. Now I might want to make this a little bit thicker, just so it's really visible. Let's go for 13. We'll do the same thing over here. Now, of course, that's one of the benefits of using components, which I did not do, but you know what? Yeah, I should probably do that. And then I can move this down here. And this one I can just flip upside down and then over this way. And the text will just do that. There we go. And this one will change to, let's go for a nice blue color. There we go. Hazma is asking, is there any new tool update coming to Adobe XD. Clarify what you mean by tool update. We have a lot of fun stuff coming to XD. I can't talk about them just yet, but we do have a lot of updates coming, especially around Adobe Max. All right. So Martin is saying, I think he was clarifying from before, I think it might be worth making the letters with the yellow background white. The letters with the yellow background. The letters, the letters with the yellow back, up here, possibly? And if that's the case, I did try that during my last masterclass. So I did try to see what that would look like if we were to use white instead of black. And the consensus from many people in the community was that the white was a little bit difficult to read against the yellow background. The black was definitely a lot more legible. I can go either way, but I think the black is definitely a little bit easier to see. All right. Someone's saying, using components has reduced the number of artboards, so while exporting, should I export every state or just the prototype is enough for developers? I mean, that's a conversation you need to have with your developers. Some like absolutely everything. Some like as little as possible. The good news is the team is working behind the scenes. I don't know when it's going to be available, but they're working to bring state support to developer spec and design specs. So that's something that's in the works. So stay tuned for that if that's something that you and your developers are looking for. All right, I'm going to go ahead and group all these elements. Call this logo. There we go. Move this up a little bit. And that's looking pretty good. Again, I might change the background here just so there's a little bit more, it's a little bit easier to read. All right. Oh, so Anahit's asking if I have time to stream, could you show an example of a GIF animating for the Behance project? I probably won't have time this stream, but it might be something I'll try to tackle next stream. Now, very similar to up here, I'm not going to go through and do this now, but I do have this on my other document, is I have a little bit of a background separation. So if I paste this in here, you can kind of see what I was going at for the logo background, right? So I can just do something like this, make sure this is behind the logo information. And let me actually get rid of this other one, just like that. So now that we have a little bit of a separation, which kind of bleeds into the next section, which is going to be all about the particular application. So let me make this a little bit larger. I am running out of time, so we're not going to probably finish it today, but I'm going to work on it behind the scenes and then upload it to Behance, hopefully over the weekend. Definitely go ahead and follow me on Behance so you see when it's, or Twitter as well. I will link to it when it is finished. Let's say the app. There we go. Position this over here. Now this area here is where I want to actually showcase all the different screens of this app. Now I did export these two. I did not export this one, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Export selected. Hey Adam, welcome. If you are joining in late like Adam, first of all, it's totally okay. But you can always go back on YouTube, rewind it, or wait till this is finished and rewatch the thing from scratch. I'll call this loading, which it was called loading already. Export. And now what I want to do is, hey Andrew, welcome, is grab all three of these and just pop them directly in here. I'm going to use these throughout this section. I want to make sure that they're all going to fit, right? Now, obviously at this point, they're not going to fit, so I'm going to make sure to shrink them down with a little bit of breathing room on the sides. This one I might have, I'm going to have like a bit of a staggered feel to that. I'm going to have it a little bit up there. And let's round out the corners, let's say 50, I don't know, 52. And I want to make sure that all of them are pretty consistent. This one will be a little bit lower, this one will be a little bit higher. And then make sure that they're all nice and centered. There we go. Now, very similar to what I did previously with the shadow, I can do the same thing. Now, to make my life a little bit easier, what you're able to do is I can actually duplicate this, for example, right? I can add a bit of a shadow. I can change the fill color, add a bit of a shadow. Let me actually go up here, grab this one, paste the appearance, change this to white, and just move it behind, right? So now I have this shadow that I can essentially just duplicate. So I can duplicate it, Let me move it down here. Oops, wrong one. Move it behind and duplicate it. And pop this one here. Now this one in particular, I may want to change the color a little bit because the primary color for this is that green in the background. So I'm going to, I should probably name all these layers, right? But I can just change this to a green, just like that. All right. Oh, so Martin says the tips of the project and the logo. Oh, I see what you're saying. So right down here, change the tips down here to white. That could be interesting. Okay, I think I got it. Sorry, Martin. I think I got it. That could be interesting. Maybe I'll try that a little bit later. But yeah, it's an interesting thought. Go ahead and group all of these. Maybe I'll just move these out just a little bit. Just like that. There we go. All right, now to wrap things up in the last 5 minutes, I may want to, maybe I'll actually, this one here, maybe I'll move out quite a bit. Maybe I'll just drop this to a more neutral color, because behind this, we might want maybe some text to talk about the fact that this application is very, focused, or it's minimalistic, for example. So I can grab my text tool, focused, make this nice and large. Minimalistic. Maybe I'll go nice and light for this one, so it's kind of looks minimalistic, right? And then in the middle, I might want a little bit of an ampersand. And maybe both of these, I'm going to just drop the opacity to about 10%. Just trying to get a little bit fancy with it. Move these out a little bit. There we go. And we can move these actually behind the logo, so that shadow behind it kind of blends in a little bit, just like that. We can even push it. We'll do that. Now this section down here is probably where I would want to focus on my colors, my typography, my icons, and that sort of thing. So I can duplicate this down. Oops. So I'll have colors. This one will be centered, possibly. And we'll have down here, we'll have our typography. And then icons. And I'm going to try to whip through this in the last few minutes. Actually, what I could do is I kind of have some of it over here. So I'm going to cheat a little bit because we only have a few minutes. And I'm going to just boop. Look at that. Look how quickly we did that. That looks pretty fancy. Perfect. All right. So let's go ahead and take a look at how things are looking. If I go ahead and preview this, we've got a nice big header image at the top, which I'll probably end up moving the logo up just a little bit. And Philip is saying, is there a difference between fonts and typography? In most cases, probably not. You can use them often interchangeably. So I probably will push this up a little bit so it's a little bit more centered, and maybe expose a little bit more of this particular application preview down at the bottom. But we've got a little bit about the project. It's an application design that came to be. I should probably push this up a little bit to Boopcast, but during a recent Adobe XD Masterclass hosted on Behance, we've got our logo, and it really dives into what exactly all this is. There's a little bit of a hint of a microphone. The B acts as the primary mark, the B but flipped, which is the P, right? Would you mind explaining again how you did the yellow bar scale with the text? Oh yes, give me 1 second. So over here, this was the first one that I did. So essentially we used content aware layout, and we have the text. So over in the layers panel, we have the text and the rectangle, which is the yellow line, inside of a group. And inside of that group, we have the group selected. Over to the right, you just turn on padding, and XD will automatically define that for you, so that when you type it out, it automatically resizes, which is super cool, right? And let me go back to here. We've got our logo. There's a bit too much space here, possibly. We've got the app, a little bit of a preview. focused and minimalistic, colors, typography, and icons. So that's going to basically wrap it up for today. I did have a little bit more that I want to cover, but definitely make sure to follow me on Twitter and Behance. And yeah, live classes are more fun. When's the next boop? So I'm going to be back in about an hour. Andrew's coming up in just a few minutes, but I'm going to be back in an hour with the final XD Masterclass of this round. We have Peter starting next week, I believe. And then next Friday, I'm going to be back for another Adobe XD Masterclass. So big thank you to everyone who has tuned in, Sherry and Harshal and Martin, Philip. If I didn't get to any of your questions, I do apologize, but I will get to them next week. So definitely bring them over. Cornell, Nina, Cody, and everyone else joining. Big thank you, and I will see you all next time.